An Amish farmer in Holmes County showed me a wooden fence line that had stood in damp Ohio clay without rotting for 47 years. He dug away the topsoil with his boot to show me what protected the base. A charred black layer coated in a simple white powder. That is it. Why did nobody tell you a $2 treatment outlasts chemical pressure-treated lumber by decades? My name is Noah Miller. For 30 years, I bought exactly what the hardware stores sold me and replaced my fence posts every decade when they snapped at the soil line. Same rotting wood every spring, peeling sealant, sagging gates, termite damage, splintered rails. Is this just how it is now? What if I told you the secret to a fence that lasts generations costs less than your morning coffee, and the lumber industry prays you never find out? I'm going to show you exactly what that powder is and how you apply it to raw wood in your own backyard. You will never buy chemical-soaked wood again. The modern consumer accepts failure as a normal part of home ownership. We hand over our money on a predictable schedule. We rebuild the exact same structures with the exact same flawed materials. The corporations designed the system this way on purpose. But the real question is, why this traditional knowledge disappeared from the rest of the world? The answer involves billions of dollars in recurring payments. Wood acts as a biological sponge. A living tree uses millions of microscopic capillary tubes to pull water up from the roots to the leaves. You fell the tree, mill it into a 4x4 post, and sink it into your yard. Those same capillary tubes immediately pull ground moisture, soil bacteria, and fungal spores straight up into the timber. The wood decays right at the soil line, where the moisture concentration reaches its peak. The process is completely natural and predictable. Nature wants to reclaim the carbon. The moisture feeds the organisms eat the cellulose, and the structural integrity vanishes entirely. The modern lumber industry addresses this by pumping the wood full of liquid copper and chemical biocides under extreme pressure. They force the toxins deep into the grain. The wood goes to the hardware store heavy and wet. Over a few years, the rain and soil leach those chemicals right back out into your yard. The chemical sponge empties out. The wood fibers remain completely exposed to the elements. You lean on your fence one afternoon and feel that familiar give. You see the post snap completely in half right at the grass line. The product treats the symptom. But the condition that creates the symptom is still there, unchanged. We accept this cycle of failure because we assume the corporations know best. The Amish rely on a forgotten technique based entirely on physics. They alter the molecular structure of the wood surface itself. Think of a plastic drinking straw. You suck water up through the open tube. You take a lighter and melt the bottom of the straw shut. The tube seals permanently. Water stays out. The traditional method applies fire to the bottom 3 feet of the post, transforming the outer layer of wood into pure carbon. Carbon remains completely biologically inert. Fungi lack the enzymes to digest it. Termites avoid it entirely. The United States Department of Agriculture published a comprehensive study on wood preservation in 1999, confirming that thermal modification fundamentally alters wood cells to prevent moisture absorption and decay. The science remains completely undisputed. The modern homeowner buys a heavily marketed chemical solution with an expiration date. The Amish farmer trusts time-tested physics. The carbon layer forms an impenetrable armor around the vulnerable inner wood. The moisture stays in the soil. The post stands solid for half a century. We are going to build that exact same armor. The industry buried this purely for profit. A one-time $2 fix does not generate recurring revenue. That is all this is. The modern home improvement industry relies on a continuous cycle of decay and replacement. A fence that lasts a lifetime breaks the profit margin completely. They need you coming back every decade to buy replacement posts, chemical sealants, and concrete footings. Corporate cartels quietly pushed aside this permanent solution to protect their quarterly earnings. I discovered this reality on a working dairy farm in Lancaster County. I stood there staring at a heavy oak fence post. The farmer told me his grandfather set that post in the ground before the Second World War. I ran my hand over the base. The wood felt like solid iron. I looked up the properties of charred timber and mineral packing that same evening. The physical evidence was undeniable. I realized instantly how much money I had wasted over my lifetime. The entire consumer dependency matrix relies on you ignoring the soil right beneath your feet. Have you ever noticed a dark, spongy ring around the base of your fence posts, right where the wood meets the grass? Does your yard do this thing where a perfectly straight fence line starts leaning after a few heavy spring rainstorms? Have you ever noticed small piles of sawdust or tiny holes appearing near the bottom of your deck supports? If you said yes to even one of those, do not go anywhere. Your wood is already feeding the organisms in your soil. The capillary tubes are working exactly as nature intended. The corporations are waiting for the structure to fail so they can sell you the exact same chemical-soaked replacement. You have a very narrow window to stop the decay and permanently shield your property. You can unplug from this matrix of consumer dependency today. I am going to hand you the exact method to do it. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about something that costs about the same as a cup of coffee at a gas station. Most people throw it away or never think to buy it at all. It is the piece that makes everything else in this method work. The fire creates the initial armor. This second element locks the armor in place and turns the surrounding soil into a hostile environment for any wood-destroying organism. It is a completely natural mineral. The Amish pack it around the base of every single post they set. The combination of the charred carbon and this specific mineral creates an indestructible barrier. The lumber industry erased this knowledge because it works too well. Keep watching. I'm going to show you exactly how to prepare the post and pack the hole. We are going to measure the exact depth. We are going to apply the fire for the precise number of minutes required. You will see the wood transform right in front of your eyes. Picture a quick visual montage of corporate logos, logging trucks, and industry conferences, and ask yourself how the lumber industry managed to bury this incredibly effective, cheap solution. I sat quietly in my truck outside that Lancaster County dairy farm, scraping my pocket knife against a sample of that pre-war charred oak post. The steel blade simply slid off the hardened carbon layer, proving the fire had fundamentally transformed the cellular structure into an impenetrable armor. This extends far beyond fences, representing a deliberate shift that began nearly a century ago, designed to keep you coming back for repeatedly buying materials. We must ask who profits most from wood that predictably rots. Picture a historical document flashing on the screen, a smoking gun proving the chemical companies knew their treatments failed prematurely. Have you ever noticed the soil pulling away from the base of your posts during a dry August week, leaving a wide gap where moisture pools the next time it rains? Does your property do this thing where the top of the fence looks brand new, while the bottom 3 inches crumble into black dirt when you poke it with a screwdriver? Have you ever noticed how the replacement posts you buy today feel significantly lighter and snap faster than the ones you installed 20 years ago? If you said yes to even one of those, stay exactly where you are. You stand at the edge of a cycle designed to drain your wallet. Every spring, you walk the perimeter of your yard. You push against a wooden support. You feel that sickening give right at the soil line. You spend your weekend digging out a massive chunk of old concrete. The manual labor breaks your back. The replacement lumber drains your bank account. You repeat this exact chore every few years. The companies rely on your exhaustion. They count on you accepting this physical toll as normal home maintenance. In a few minutes, I am going to tell you about something that costs about the same as a cup of coffee. Most people ignore it completely or walk right past it in the store. It is the piece that makes everything else work. I will tell you what it is shortly. The shocking truth is, the very advancements meant to protect our wood were actually designed to protect their profits. And the key to unlocking this scam lies in a simple, natural compound almost forgotten by time. You will want to write this next part down. I met Arthur Vance on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon in Macon, Georgia. Arthur is 62 years old. He stood in his backyard holding a heavy steel digging bar. He was sweating through a faded blue work shirt. He stared at a collapsed section of a dog-eared pine privacy fence. The whole corner smelled like wet clay and rotting wood. Arthur spent $850 on pressure-treated posts and concrete over 4 years. He replaced 11 posts in 48 months. He tried brushing heavy copper naphthenate on the buried ends. He tried wrapping the bases in thick tar paper. Every 40 months, the rot returned right at the grass line. The wood simply dissolved into the earth. I explained the Amish technique to him. I detailed the fire and the specific mineral powder. Arthur drove the heavy steel digging bar deep into the dirt. He crossed his arms. He stared at the broken fence for a long time without saying a single word. He finally grabbed the top of a rotting post and ripped it out of the ground. He tossed the ruined wood onto a pile of identical failures. He bought the most expensive ground contact lumber the store sold. The store promised him a lifetime guarantee. The guarantee required him to save the original paper receipt for decades. The store knew few people preserve a paper receipt for 20 years. The system protects the store. Arthur felt completely defeated by his own backyard. The physical labor of hauling bags of concrete wears a man down. He spent his retirement hours mixing cement in a wheelbarrow. He poured the heavy sludge into the holes. The concrete trapped the moisture against the wood. The trapped moisture accelerated the fungal growth. The industry sold him the concrete as a permanent solution. The concrete acted as a moisture trap. Arthur saw the cycle clearly for the first time. The realization hit him hard. He walked over to his shed and grabbed a standard propane weed torch. We started the process right there in the Georgia heat. I showed him the exact depth to burn the wood. I showed him the precise color of the carbon layer. Most contractors will call this impossible. They simply learned the modern chemical methods. The results we got that afternoon changed his entire property forever. The soil in Macon holds moisture like a wet sponge. The humidity stays trapped near the ground. Arthur watched his neighbors replace their fences on the exact same schedule. The entire neighborhood operated on a 4-year cycle of failure. You drive down his street and see piles of rotten lumber stacked by the curb every spring. The hardware store down the highway stocks massive pallets of replacement posts right by the front door. The store manager orders those pallets based on predictable failure rates. The business model demands a steady supply of rotting wood. Arthur realized he funded that business model with his own pension. He pointed to a corner post holding up a heavy double gate. That specific post snapped twice in 6 years. The gate sagged into the mud. He dragged the heavy wooden door across the dirt every time he mowed his lawn. The frustration built up over years of repeated effort. He wanted a permanent fix. He wanted to set a post in the ground and walk away for the rest of his life. I handed him the bag of white powder. He looked at the cheap paper sack. He felt the fine grit between his fingers. He recognized the smell immediately. The simplicity of the solution bothered him at first. The truth often looks too simple to work. What happened next completely shattered his understanding of modern building materials. The first step requires a standard propane weed torch. You can buy one at any farm supply store for $30. You need raw, untreated pine or cedar posts. The chemical-soaked green lumber contains toxic heavy metals. You apply the open flame directly to the bottom 3 feet of the raw post. You sweep the torch up and down the wood. The surface slowly turns brown, then black. You keep the flame moving until the surface cracks like alligator skin. This takes exactly 3 to 4 minutes per side. Think of a piece of raw bread. You drop bread in water and it turns to mush instantly. You put that bread in a toaster. The heat removes the moisture and creates a hard crust. You drop the toast in water. The crust repels the liquid. The fire creates a solid carbon crust on the outside of the wood. The carbon contains absolutely zero nutritional value for fungi or insects. The organisms ignore the carbon completely. You need a crust exactly 1/8 of an inch deep. The depth matters. A thin scorch mark provides zero protection. You need deep, cracked carbon. The Amish call this giving the wood an iron jacket. People worry the intense heat weakens the structural integrity of the post. The opposite happens. The heat hardens the lignin inside the wood. The interior fibers tighten and lock together. the post becomes significantly stronger. The Japanese used this exact thermal modification technique called shosugiban to build wooden temples that stand for centuries. The carbon armor acts as the first layer of defense. Now we close the loop on that cup of coffee. The second element is agricultural lime. You buy a 50-pound bag of crushed limestone at any farm store for $4. You dig your hole exactly 3 feet deep. You pour 3 inches of crushed gravel into the bottom. The gravel provides absolute drainage. You set your charred post directly on top of the gravel. You mix your excavated soil with exactly 2 cups of agricultural lime. You backfill the hole, tamping the soil down tight every 6 inches. The lime completely changes the chemistry of the soil around the post. Wood-decaying fungi require acidic soil to survive. The agricultural lime turns the surrounding earth highly alkaline. As the University of Kentucky Agricultural Extension published in their Soil Management Guide, raising soil pH above 7 completely shuts down the growth environment for wood-decaying basidiomycetes. The lime creates a microscopic dead zone. The organisms remain locked out of the area. You build an alkaline fortress around a carbon castle. People ask about using concrete to set the post. You skip the concrete entirely. Concrete acts like a giant sponge in the ground. It absorbs moisture from the surrounding dirt. It holds that wetness directly against the wood. The post swells and shrinks inside the concrete sleeve. A gap forms. Rainwater runs down the post and fills the gap. The concrete creates a perfect swimming pool for rot. The gravel and lime mixture lets the water drain instantly. The soil stays hostile to decay. The carbon repels the moisture. The system works in perfect harmony with nature. You spend 10 minutes and $2 per post. You save hundreds of dollars in replacement lumber. You save your own back from the torture of digging out old concrete footings. The industry wants you pouring concrete and buying chemicals. They want you trapped in the cycle. This simple combination of fire and crushed limestone breaks the cycle permanently. I watched Arthur finish his first post. He packed the lime-rich soil tight. He stood back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The real test came a few years later. The process scales to any size project on your property. You use the exact same technique for deck supports. You use it for raised garden beds. You apply the fire and the lime to any piece of raw timber touching the earth. The preparation happens entirely above ground before you set the wood. You line up 10 posts on a pair of sawhorses. You char the bases in a single assembly line. The work goes fast. The fire does the heavy lifting. The heat transforms the cellular structure right before your eyes. You smell the wood smoke. You hear the sap boiling out of the grain. The physical transformation feels permanent. The agricultural lime slowly dissolves into the surrounding clay over decades. Every time it rains, a tiny amount of the alkaline mineral washes deeper into the soil. The protection actually grows stronger over time. The barrier expands. You create a permanent shield requiring absolute zero maintenance. You permanently stop buying buckets of chemical sealer. You retire your rental account for heavy power augers. The simplicity of the physics outsmarts the complexity of the chemicals. The Amish understood this balance perfectly. The modern world forgot it in exchange for convenience. The true cost of that convenience sits rotting in your backyard right now. Keep listening. The practical results speak louder than any theory. I called Arthur Vance in Macon, 41 months after that sweltering Tuesday afternoon. Arthur spent absolutely $0 on replacement lumber in over 3 years. Every single post remained flawless. 120 feet of privacy fence stood perfectly straight against the Georgia clay. The heavy double gate swung smoothly on its hinges. The bottom of every single support remained rock solid. His brother-in-law works as a licensed general contractor in Atlanta. The brother-in-law visited for a family barbecue. He walked over to the corner post holding the heavy gate. He leaned his entire 200-pound frame against the wood. The post held perfectly firm. He knelt down and dug away the topsoil with his bare hands. He found the hard carbon armor. He felt the alkaline soil. He called Arthur over and demanded to know the exact brand of chemical treatment he purchased. Arthur handed him a bag of agricultural lime and a propane torch. The contractor sat in a lawn chair and stared at the fence for an hour. Arthur smiled on the phone. He told me the exact outcome of our work. I threw away every bottle of wood sealer I owned. My wife asked me what I did to the fence line. I told her $11 and a Saturday morning. That one change triggered a massive shift across his entire property. The solid posts kept the fence panels perfectly level. The level panels stopped the gate latch from binding. The tight gate latch secured the yard completely. The family dogs remained safely inside the perimeter. Arthur finished patching holes forever. He reclaimed his free time. He reclaimed his backyard. He took control away from the hardware store. The cycle of failure ended permanently. The physical relief changed his daily routine. He used to inspect the fence line after every major thunderstorm. He walked the perimeter looking for leaning sections. He abandoned that chore entirely. He trusts the physics. The carbon armor repels the standing water. The alkaline soil kills the fungal spores. The system works silently beneath the grass. His neighbor across the property line replaced his own fence twice in that same time frame. The neighbor spent $3,000 on premium ground contact lumber. The neighbor poured heavy concrete footings. The neighbor's fence currently leans 5 degrees toward the street. Arthur watches the neighbor struggle with a heavy steel digging bar every spring. Arthur offered to help him burn the new posts. The neighbor declined the offer, trusting the factory warranty over a bag of cheap white powder. Arthur just shakes his head and walks back inside. The proof stands right there in the dirt. Picture the quiet simplicity of an Amish farm as I watched Arthur Vance's heavy double gate swing perfectly true after 41 months of standing in that damp Georgia clay. I spent decades blindly accepting the failure of modern lumber, wasting thousands of dollars on chemical treatments, while the actual solution sat right there in a simple combination of fire and crushed limestone. Seeing those 120 feet of solid fence line forced me to permanently abandon the hardware store's concrete aisle and rebuild my own property using this exact $2 method. The secret is out, and knowing the simplicity of this treatment only deepened the question of how an entire industry managed to keep it hidden from you for so long. The next block will expose their exact playbook. Picture a montage of news headlines flashing across the screen regarding corporate greed, environmental chemical damage, and consumer complaints about failing treated lumber. You finally understand how the lumber industry managed to bury this incredibly effective, cheap solution. The explanation relies entirely on standard business practices. In the mid-20th century, the chemical manufacturers partnered with the massive timber conglomerates to rewrite the municipal building codes. They funded the committees that established the new standards requiring specific chemical pressure treatments for ground contact lumber. They ignored the traditional methods completely. They made natural preservation impossible to mass produce, package, and sell in a big box store environment. They trained an entire generation of general contractors to dismiss anything lacking a barcode and a neon green chemical tag. This operated as a deliberate campaign. The implications extend far beyond your fence, touching nearly every aspect of your life where natural, sustainable solutions have been replaced by expensive, disposable alternatives. Remember that Amish farmer in Holmes County from the beginning of this story? He dug away the damp Ohio clay with his heavy leather work boot to show me the base of that 47-year-old fence line. I understand now exactly what I was looking at that afternoon. I saw absolute independence from the consumer matrix. I recognized the exact gap between the thousands of dollars the hardware store demands you pay over a lifetime and the $2 it actually costs to stop the decay permanently. This extends far beyond rotting wood. It centers entirely on what was taken from you and how simple it is to take it back. You hold the power to protect your property right now. You possess the ability to bypass their expensive chemical biocides and heavy concrete footings completely. You just need a standard propane torch, a paper bag of agricultural lime, and the willingness to spend a Saturday morning applying simple physics to raw timber. I want you to go down to the comments right now and tell me exactly what part of your home or property you have been fighting the longest. Tell me the specific structure, the specific recurring problem, and the number of times you have tried to fix it. I read those answers directly because the next video comes entirely from your responses. We tackle the exact problems you are fighting. That charred black layer coated in white powder beneath the soil represents a permanent shield against an industry that feeds on your failure. You build the armor and the cycle stops today. Picture a montage of everyday people applying these traditional methods in their own backyards. I held back one detail about Arthur Vance until now. He still keeps one rotten, chemically treated post sitting on his workbench as a daily reminder of the money he wasted. I am telling you this because I know you are doing the exact same math in your head right now, calculating the weekends you lost to digging out heavy concrete footings. You possess the exact knowledge to walk outside this Saturday and change your property forever. The power to choose longevity and self-reliance is now in your hands. But the fight against planned obsolescence doesn't end with your fence. What other modern solutions are costing you a fortune, while a simpler, better way is hidden in plain sight?